Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order for the Village Board for the November 17th, 2025 meeting. And if we could all please recognize that in the back of the room, we have the post-208 American Legion. Do I have that correct? And they're going to lead us in the pledge. So take it away, men. It's all yours.
And salute.
Join me in the pledge, please. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Maggie, if you could please call the roll.
Trustee Bertucci,
Here.
Trustee Zyck,
Here.
Trustee Schwingbeck, Trustee Santa Maria. Here. Trustee Manganaro.
Here.
Trustee Dunnington. Here. Trustee Gilbert.
Here.
Trustee LaBedz. Here. President Tinaglia.
Here. Thank you. And we have two sets of minutes to approve. The first one is from 11/3/25. Are there any questions or changes or anything on that?
Mayor, I need to pass.
Pass recorded from Trustee Bertucci. Anyone else? Anyone from the audience? If not, I think a voice vote's correct. All those we have to have a motion first. I'm sorry.
I'll move approval of the minutes of November 3rd, 2025.
Second.
Motion made by Trustee LaBedz, seconded by Trustee Zyck. Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion carries. The next is the closed session minutes of 9/15/2025. Again, any changes, corrections, or deletions, or recusals? Anyone from the audience? If not, is there a motion to approve?
I'll move approval of the September 15th, 2025 closed session minutes.
Second.
Motion made by Trustee Manganaro, seconded by Trustee Santa Maria. Do I have that right? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion carries. And then now we have the approval of the accounts payable. And for that, I'd call on Trustee Bertucci.
Mayor, I'll move approval of the warrant register for the check date November 15th, 2025, in the amount of $2,538,147.28.
Second.
Motion made by Trustee Bertucci, seconded by Trustee LaBedz. Is there any comment or changes from the village board? Anybody from the audience? Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I think this is a roll call vote. Maggie?
Trustee Bertucci,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Manganaro,
Aye.
Trustee Dunnington. Yes. Trustee Gilbert,
Yes.
Trustee Zyck,
Yes.
Trustee Santa Maria. Yes. President Tinaglia.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, so I have the distinct privilege and honor to do a quick proclamation and recognition, and I'm going to come down, and if Mr. Padavani could join me up front here. So I was privileged to visit a number of functions over the last week in regards to Veterans Day on November 11th, and it was wonderful, and it was an opportunity to thank a lot of people, men and women who gave an awful lot for the freedoms of our country. And I thought about it, and I discussed it with our board, and we said, you know, what better thing that I could do, we could do, is call for the entire month of November as Veterans Month. So my goal here today is to recognize and honor the courage and the heart of these veterans, and there are several here in the audience today to help us celebrate this, but none more active and none more giving than this gentleman here. So I'm going to present this to Greg Padavani. I'm going to read it right now with my glasses. So, in recognition of the United States veterans for the entire month of November, whereas the United States veterans of the armed forces selflessly and heroically served our nation in times of war and peace, defending the principles of freedom and democracy, and whereas the sacrifices made by these men and women demonstrate their enduring commitment to duty, honor, and country, and whereas in 2024 there were approximately 17.6 million U.S. military veterans, making up about 7% of the adult population, and whereas the Village of Arlington Heights supports our veterans and recognizes the irreplaceable contributions made by the men and women in uniform who served our country, and whereas the Village of Arlington Heights honors with respectful recognition the contributions our veterans made to advance peace and freedom at home and around the world, and whereas the Village of Arlington Heights encourages American citizens to pause and reflect on the courage and sacrifice of our veterans. Now, therefore, I, James J. Tinaglia, Mayor of the Village of Arlington Heights, along with the Arlington Heights Village Board, extend our deepest gratitude and heartfelt appreciation for the service and sacrifice made by every single veteran. We honor them today, the entire month of November, and every day. This is for you, Greg. Ladies and gentlemen, any of the military who are here today, please come up here and join us. And board, if you guys could come down too. We're going to take a group picture.
And Mayor Tinaglia, Village Board, staff, and the community of Arlington Heights, on behalf of all the veterans here and all the veterans everywhere, we want to say thank you for this recognition, this honor of recognizing the service and sacrifice of so many of these men and women who have made our nation what it is today. And I'd like to even add one more thing to that third whereas, and that is that when we talk about 7% of our adult population being veterans, I'd also like to add to that that only 0.4%, less than 0.5%, are serving in our active military right now. So keep that in mind, that there's less than 0.5% of those young men and women out there who are protecting us on the front lines right now. And those are the ones we really keep in our prayers every night for their safety and their return to their families. But this is just the most wonderful honor. We thank you, all of us thank you, Mayor, and trustees and Village of Arlington Heights. Thank you so much.
I didn't get paid off here, okay? This is all legit.
Ladies and gentlemen, what you just saw today, or right here now, was one of our Vietnam Veterans of America members, Chapter 311, which I'm a member of as well, here in Des Plaines, presented the mayor with a challenge coin. And in the military, a challenge coin is a very high honor. It's a way of expressing respect and appreciation for somebody who the military or that unit really appreciates. And this particular VVA, or Vietnam Veterans of America medal, this is only 3 left from our chapter. So this is a real important one to give to our mayor tonight. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Mayor, we're dismissed, right?
You are dismissed.
Veterans, you're dismissed.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, while they're filing out, again, that was a wonderful experience, and my thanks to all of them. Public hearings, we have none. Citizens to be heard is next. I have a number of blue cards, but I think they're all for a couple of specific items. If there's something else that I'm missing that someone wants to speak about that's not on the agenda, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. If not, we're going to move on to the agenda items, and I'll call on you when it's appropriate. I see no hands, so we're going to move on. The consent agenda is next, and is there anyone on the village board that would like to remove an item from the consent agenda? Trustee Dunnington.
I would like to remove H from the consent agenda, please.
All right, so H shall be removed, and we will discuss that separately. I have a blue card from someone who wants to speak about that as well, so we'll call on that person at that time. Are there any other items on the consent that need to be removed? Is there anyone from the audience that wishes to have a trustee remove an item from the consent? Is there anyone on the board who wants to vote no or pass on any of the consent items?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to record a pass for items C and D, please.
Okay, so
C and D.
pass for C and D shall be noted for trustee Manganaro. Anyone else? If not, I think a motion for that item for consent agenda is appropriate. Trustee Bertucci.
Mayor, I'll move approval of the remaining consent agenda items.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Trustee Bertucci?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Zyck?
Yes.
Trustee Manganaro?
Aye.
Trustee Gilbert?
Yes.
Trustee Santa Maria?
Yes.
Trustee Dunnington?
Yes.
President Tinaglia?
Yes. Okay, Manager Recklow, should we take up item H right now then? Is that appropriate?
Sure.
Okay, we'll do that. So I will call on trustee Dunnington, since she requested to remove that item, and then I'll call on Rob Brodecki, who wants to speak on that as well.
Thank you, Mayor. I know we've all done a lot of work on this ordinance, and I really appreciate that from the police department and the village board and the commissions. The reason I pulled this off the agenda, consent agenda, is because I'm concerned that there's parts of the ordinance that are overly restrictive. Micromobility devices offer individuals who can't drive or choose not to drive a reliable, inexpensive mobility option. Age, disability, personal choice, and lack of other transportation options are common reasons for using devices. These devices are frequently used by lower income individuals, and they are environmentally responsible. So we should be willing to embrace their responsible use in our community. Cook County has a transportation plan that they call the Last Mile, which is about making public transportation more accessible and seamless by providing solutions for the final leg of a journey, such as connecting residents from a train station or bus stop to their home or workplaces. I believe these micro-mobility devices can really help with residents being able to use public transportation. So I think there's 3 areas that we should make a change in this ordinance. And I believe that by making these changes, it'll be more equitable for all users. I believe the ordinance we've already addressed the unsafe behaviors that we're trying to control, the reckless riding, making sure people follow the rules of the road, preventing multiple riders on a device, and helmet use. So I believe this ordinance should not be quite so restrictive, so it doesn't prevent responsible mobility use. So the first one is in section 1. When we discuss this issue, in the ordinance, it says, it discusses the definition. It's item 1I, low-speed mobility device. And in this version, it says, a motorized mobility vehicle or device being operated at or capable of speeds up to 10 miles per hour. I believe that we should strike out the or capable of. I remember that we discussed that if someone is on an e-bike or a scooter, it might be able to go 25 or 28 miles per hour. But as long as they were willing to operate it at 10 miles an hour, then it should be considered a low-speed mobility device. It's not what it's capable of, but what the user is actually operating the device at. And so that would be for the low-speed mobility device, as well as to the standard mobility device, to strike out or capable of. The other item I think that we should change is under, it's B, compliance with laws, number 2. That's where we are saying that standard motorized mobility vehicles, you need to be 18 years of age to use one of those devices, which can go from 10 to 28 miles per hour, or you have to have a valid learner's permit. And we really talked about education when we were talking about this ordinance, and the organization Illinois Bicycle Safe, Ride Illinois offers a certificate so that if someone was willing to learn about the rules of the road and bike safety, then I believe they should be able to ride those devices as well. And then the third one is, I don't believe in here we talk about bike paths. And we have our Wilkie Road path, and we'll have a future ComEd path, which are designed for different speeds than sidewalks. They're designed for 15 mile per hour speeds by both traditional bicyclists and mobility devices. So I think we need to update the section, it's number 3, standard mobility devices may only be operated on public roads, so that they can be operated on shared use paths when drivers drive under 15 miles per hour. So I'd be happy to make a motion for those items. Or
We
could hear
can.
from- Okay.
Yeah, but let's wait one moment. Let's do this. Rob, are you in the audience? Yep. Rob, come on up and share. If there's someone else who wants to speak on this item, now's the time as well. Just either raise your hand and I'll call on you, but go ahead, Rob.
Thank you. I'd like to echo a lot of what Trustee Dunnington was talking about, and I'd like to specifically focus on how the language as it's currently written is very restrictive to responsible teens who want to ride these e-bikes and things. And this is one of the groups that can get the most advantage out of these e-bikes and mobility devices by being able to more independently and fully participate in community, going around to school, to events and after-school programs and things without burdening their parents needing to chauffeur them around and things. So as Trustee Dunnington suggested, I would like to see us change section B2 to read, have something where it says, allowing under 18 if achieved silver level or higher on the Ride Illinois Bike Safety Quiz, as that shows that they know what the rules of the road are, how to be safe, and that they're going to be responsibly doing it. Second, I'd also like to see, as she said, mentioning about, the shared use paths are especially the best place for them amongst our current infrastructure for e-bikes. The roads can be too dangerous sometimes with drivers and cars, and the sidewalks can be, especially, if they try to go fast, that's dangerous to pedestrians who are the main focus of sidewalks. I would like to see section C updated to read that that e-bikes are allowed on shared use paths operated at 15 miles per hour or under, and traditionally even on sidewalks could do if under 10 miles an hour. They're similar as a toy device at that speed. By going with these changes, it still gives the police the ability to enforce an ordinance that will restrict reckless riding while enabling responsible riders to get the full benefits out of these. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Was there one more? The one that just handed in is Ryan Bennett?
Excuse my voice. I'm here in support also of section B2 with agreement upon us being able to have our children be educated on the matter and become responsible via passing these tests that are available. I would remind the board here that Class 2, or as we're referring to them as standard, is in alignment with Illinois law. I would hate for us to be more restrictive than is currently in place. And would just like to, excuse me, would just like to call out the opportunities that are available to some of the less abled or the disabled to keep up with their peers in these situations where some of these other kids are riding perhaps regular bikes, and this would be a way for them to access some opportunities that they may not otherwise be able to do so. And in consideration of this further, I would just say if we're going to go with a speed limit, I had heard Walls talk, but I had heard something about 10 miles an hour. There are kids that are running 5-minute miles in cross country. So there needs to be a reasonableness test with that also, that a bicycle should do more than what the feet could do as if we're talking about accessibility. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other blue cards on this, so what I think we'll do is we'll go to the board here real quick. And if you want to make a motion, I think now is appropriate. Go ahead, and if it gets a second, then we'll discuss it.
Okay.
Do that, so go ahead.
Okay. So do we need a first a motion on the whole?
Let's do one at a time, I think, right? Or is it one motion that we're going to make with all three of these modifications? What?
I one at a time.
Mayor, you can't, I mean, that, there's nothing improper about a motion that out of the gate, as, for example, a motion to approve,
Yeah,
but with the following changes. That's a valid initial motion.
yeah.
Okay.
So it's up to you.
Okay. So motion to approve the amending Chapter 18 of the Municipal Code of the Village of Arlington Heights regarding mobility vehicles and devices, with the change of striking out or capable of in item 1I and 1-2, as well as number 3, adding language that standard mobility devices may be operated on a shared use path when driven under 15 miles per hour. And finally, B2 would be allowing operators who have achieved a silver or higher level in the Ride Illinois Bicycle Safety Quiz.
Okay, so that's your motion. Is there a second for this motion?
Point of clarification.
Sure.
Where is the language on standard mobility devices to be added?
That's in compliance with laws B2.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
I'll second.
We got Trustee Zyck seconded. Okay. Now we can discuss it a little bit further. Questions
Mayor?
from the board?
I do have questions. I'm sorry. Trustee Dunnington, can you, I got that striking out the or capable of part. And I guess when I look at the ordinance that was proposed for tonight, I think I'm not seeing where the right part for the, where you want to add the shared.
That is it's under location restrictions, which is C, location restrictions, and then it's number 3.
Okay.
It talks about how you can only have the standard mobility device on public roadways, and they're prohibited on sidewalks. So I'd like them to be allowed on our shared youth paths.
Okay,
With under 15 miles per hour.
Thank you. I heard that wrong. That's why I was having trouble finding it. And then the last thing that I have a question about is the silver test from
From Ride, Illinois.
Ride, Illinois. So my question is, does somebody who completes that receive some kind of card or certificate or something like that that they
Certificate.
can show? Like they could a learner's permit or something like that? Okay, thank you.
Anyone else on the board? Questions? Trustee Zyck.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make sure that we're all understanding exactly what's going on. The reason why in B2, we decided to put in those restrictions was because one of the concerns that we had as we're seeing these kids rolling around, and I've run into a number of them, unfortunately, where they're under 16, they just don't understand the rules of the road. And you can see that you can see what's going on. So we're not taking out any of those restrictions, but we're adding in, correct? The quiz result, making sure that they get the silver or above, because that shows that they do understand, they have seen the rules of the road, and they know where they're going with that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else on the board? Trustee Bertucci.
If, I'd like to ask a question either of Nick, Greg, or Randy. And that would be is if we change and we allow vehicles that are capable of going over 10 miles an hour, so to speak, and I don't mean by 12 miles an hour, but I mean like 25 or more, say 20 or 25 or more. I mean, starts to seem to be fast enough that there might be a concern of those vehicles being on the sidewalk, number one. And is it unlimited then at that point in time? Any vehicle, as long as, so if somebody brings a full-out motorcycle onto the sidewalk and is driving it on the sidewalk, but is only at 10 miles an hour, would this change possibly allow for that?
If I could start, and then I would let Deputy Chief Zernacki or Chief Pecora jump in. First, a couple of broader comments, if that's all right, Trustee Bertucci.
Sure.
To get in this. I mean, I think looking at this, generally our response to all these three items from a staff perspective relates to enforceability. I think I expressed in the very first conversation we had about this topic that staff wanted to make sure that we were going to have an ordinance that was very easy for our police officers to enforce, and that gave them the discretion to enforce it in a way that, would be practical. And one of the reasons why we had, starting with that first one, going that speed or capable of it, there were two reasons for that. One, some of these devices may not be readily recognizable as to what class they are, and so either you're going that fast or you aren't. And if you're going that fast, you're going to get a ticket. And the other thing is there are ones that are very recognizable, to your point, Trustee Bertucci, that they should not be on the road or they should not be on a sidewalk. And so we wanted to give the police officers the latitude to write a ticket either way. Another scenario you may have is, you got a 911 call that there's a e-bike going 30 miles an hour down the sidewalk, and there's an individual in a red shirt and black pants and a white hat. And by the time they get there, the thing's going 10 miles an hour, but sure enough, there's a person on e-bike with, meeting that description. The officer would have some ability to write a ticket and enforce that based on, either of those criteria. That's number one. But the intention is not to just go after everybody blindly. Our officers use discretion routinely, but the idea is to give them the most tools they can to ensure safety. As for the certificate issue, the only issue we would say there is we are, in the regulatory world, very familiar with what it takes to get a learner's permit. And that's something that most young people that get a learner's permit carry it with them at all times. We are not familiar with this program in terms of this silver certificate and what that would mean, the rigor with which that's tested by the people that is it an online test? Is it something you have to get signed off on by some kind of state agency? Or is it something that you can do when someone nods their head and say that it's good enough? And the other thing is, are kids going to really be carrying that certificate everywhere they go? Those would be our concerns on that item. As for the shared youth pass, the use pass, under the current version of this, you can, again, with officer discretion, be going 10 miles an hour on these shared use paths as the ordinance is written. You wouldn't be able to go 15, but you could go 10 miles an hour with the different, so again, this is a policy issue that's up to the board, but I wanted to point out those things from a practical enforcement standpoint. I don't know if Chief McCord or Deputy Chief Jernecki would have anything else to add, because they were way deeper into this than I was in terms of the writing.
No, absolutely. The village manager kind of summarized it pretty well. To your question with the e-motos and taking the or capable of, that could mean that you could have a very high-powered device on a sidewalk being operated at 10 miles an hour. So that's of concern to us, because we know that, these devices, kids aren't going to throttle them. They could be going 10 miles an hour while the squad car is going down the street, but the second we turn away, go down the other street, they just open it wide up and they're off. So that is of concern to us. Same with the certificate. It'd be hard. Right now we could run a person's name, date of birth, see if they have a license, even if they're not carrying their license with them, and be able to verify that they have the appropriate credentialing, I would say, to be operating those. With a certificate, they'd have to have it on the person. I don't believe any of these safety quizzes have any databases that we could access to be able to say, does this juvenile, does this youth did they actually complete everything? So from an enforcement standpoint, it could be a little bit trickier.
Okay. Thank you.
Trustee Gilbert.
So I think I like striking the or capable of, because I think the last time we were here and discussing this, one of my biggest concerns was that if kids had a scooter that could go, or a bike that could go 19, they were able to throttle it to 10 to be able to go on the sidewalks. And my concern was that I don't want to have families go out and buy new devices if they already have one and they can make it go within the boundaries of the law. So I think, to Trustee Dunnington's point, that's a good thing. And it was my understanding that that's how this was going to be written in the first place, because I had thought that was where we were, where, even if somebody had, because I've seen a lot of these scooters, they routinely have a 19-mile-an-hour cap. I don't know why, but they do. And so, and seeing kids, I don't want to if you can teach the kid to go 10 on a 19, that's probably a good lesson to learn too. So I'm confused. I'm still confused about number 3, and that's on me. I'm not sure what we mean here with this certificate. So we're saying, can you please explain it to me again? Because
I think it's important that some younger kids are able to ride the scooters, like
but what are we
14, 15-year-olds.
So we're saying like a 14 or 15-year-old, like under...
If they've had training and some education about the rules of the road, then they should be able to ride these devices as well.
And that would be, where would we put that in here? How would that play in?
That would be in... So it's under compliance with laws, which is...
So we're saying it's unlawful for anybody under the age of 18, but 16 or older with a permit and a driver's license, but you think we should add anybody under 16 with the silver
with
certificate?
Training, right.
Okay.
And the Ride Illinois is one of the options for providing some kind of training for younger kids to be able to ride these devices.
My knee jerk on that is that it's something that I get it. I still don't know if a kid who's that young needs to go over 10 miles an hour on a device, would be my concern. I don't think that there's a problem limiting them to 10 miles an hour. And to be fair, if they can pedal faster than 10 miles an hour, wonderful. I don't know when pedals went out of style, but I tell my kids and their friends that all the time. So again, it's not like this is the only way that people have to get around. And so that would be my thing. I have an issue with some kids, even with a certificate, being able to go that fast on those devices. But otherwise, I think it's
And could I ask, while we're having this little discussion, is it on the street? Like, or if the person was 14 or 15 and he had the silver certificate, is the motion made so that he could or she could ride on the street or only on the sidewalks?
It would be the same as how it's written, so it's on any public street, sidewalk, parking lot, bike path, or other public property.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? I see Robin.
Thank you. On the same item, the last sentence added was persons under 16 years of age may operate a low-speed mobility device, so they still can operate something. And the way the discussion was going a little bit ago, it made it sound to me like, no, they were being banned if they were under 16, but that's not the case.
They're banned from the standard motorized mobility.
They can't go over 10.
Yeah, okay. Got it.
Mayor, can I make one more point?
Yeah, please.
I'm just going to say that in the ordinance as written, one of the categories is out-of-class electric vehicle. These are these e-motos. I think this goes to Trustee Bertucci's point that they are outright banned, in these cases where they cannot be operated. And so, if we were to make this change, you would be able to just have them, these e-motos, as long as you didn't drive over 10 miles an hour. Now, some of these devices have speeds, top speeds, well in excess of 28 miles an hour. I don't know if Deputy Chief Zernecki can speak to the top speeds of some of these.
Yeah,
devices.
some of these devices, and even it's not just the e-motos, but I've seen even scooters. You could YouTube them that they get up to 80 miles an hour. They're wearing full body gear, helmets, and these small scooters are going pretty fast. So that's one of our concerns too, with or capable of with the out of class vehicles. It would change that dynamic a little bit over there. That those, as the village manager said, that those would be allowed on the street.
Mayor,
Yes.
I think we actually already have that language under C, location restrictions. Under 4, it says out-of-class electric vehicles may not be operated on public roadways and are prohibited on sidewalks. No person may operate an out-of-class electric vehicle on a sidewalk. So that would apply to everybody, regardless of age.
It would be more based on the definition of what the out-of-class vehicle is. If you remove that little caveat or capable of, and it's only that speed restriction, that changes the definition of the out-of-class. So it's just going back to that definition. It's going to change the dynamics.
The capability of it that makes it out of class, whereas if we take or capable of, then the only thing that would be banned on the street would be a vehicle that's actually going over 28 miles an hour.
Okay, this is complicated. We've got 3 very specific amendments to this ordinance, and I don't know that we're going to end up having whether it be unanimous or majority rule for all 3. So what's the pleasure of the board? Should we do a straw poll, one at a time first, or do we do the vote and then just see what happens?
Are we able to break these out? And
We probably could, but the motion right now is for all 3. Mr. Passman, do you have a recommendation on how to move forward on this next step?
There's a lot of paths, Mayor. I don't know that I do at this point. I don't know that I've heard from the majority of the board, and certainly even with that, as you noted, the motion is on the floor. It has been seconded. It does include all 3 of these proposed. It is approval of the ordinance with these 3 changes. So you could divide the question. You could vote on this ordinance. You could seek amendments to the main motion. There's a lot of different tools at your disposal. Obviously, and I know it is the shared goal of the board to reach consensus on whatever will get a majority vote.
Yeah. All right, so if we vote on this ordinance, which we have to, because there's a motion made in a second, and we have to vote on this. If this does not pass, as currently stated by Trustee Dunnington and seconded by Trustee Zyck, another motion can be made one at a time, or however we want to approach it, whoever
Correct.
wants to do it. So
Right. Failure of this, if this motion passes, then of course it
if
passes.
this motion passes, then it's over.
And if it fails, you can entertain a new motion that does something different.
Right. Okay, so the motion on the floor is for all three changes. Mr. Reckloff, could you paraphrase the three really quick, or Mr. Passman? One of them is changing,
Mr. Passman has better notes.
I'd be happy to give it a shot and obviously
Please.
look to the
Yeah.
trustee Dunnington to confirm. It is a motion to approve the ordinance as drafted, but with three revisions. First revision or type of revision, and all this, by the way, I should note, now I'll be a little more specific, but I know where trustee Dunnington is pointing to. The ordinance in question amends section 18-313 of the village code. The first set of changes is to section 18-313A1, and it would be to remove the clause "or capable of" from subsections Romanettes 1 and 2, which deal with low-speed mobility devices and standard mobility devices. And trustee Dunnington, if at any point I've misstated this, okay, thank you. The second change is to subsection 18-313B2, and it would be to add that someone who is even under 16, or actually anyone who has the Ride Illinois bicycle safety quiz, I think if they score a silver or higher, then they can ride a standard mobility device or vehicle on these properties, whether or not they're 18 or 16 or has a learner's permanent driver's license. And then the third change will be to section 18-313 subsection C3. That section currently reads that standard mobility devices may only be operated on public roadways and are prohibited on sidewalks. We amended to clarify that they may also be operated on shared use paths at a maximum speed of 15 miles per hour.
Correct.
okay, we're in agreement that that's what the motion and the second is. I think we need to do a roll call vote on this, please.
Mr. Mayor?
No, yes, I'm sorry.
Prior to the roll call, I did have a comment regarding the change to, excuse me, this is taking a fair bit of scrolling, on the age limit and the certification. Mr. Bennett, when you were here before us last time, your wife spoke, and she's a physician who gave us some really informative data about this, because there's a comment about why not pedal. And one of the things that she educated me about is that people who ride e-bikes tend to ride further and more and longer. And so from a pure fitness standpoint, and more importantly from a mobility standpoint, I do think it's important to allow younger people to have access with the certification, the education that Trustee Dunnington has suggested. We also had a family here where for them it is the only way, because the single parent works, that their child can get to after-school activities. It's a choice between that and the child being in front of a screen between out of school and when the parent gets home. I think these are accessibility issues that are important for folks in the village, and I believe that this amendment will allow that kind of access to everyone in the village. I think it's important.
Okay. Anyone else? If not, I guess there is one more.
I guess there is one more.
Trustee LaBedz.
So I guess as I sit here and think about this, you know, I have, I also agree that I thought in our discussion in the first part about the or capable of, the striking of it, that we didn't talk about it like that. The other things I'm not sure about, but I guess the comment that I'm going to make is that we had an ordinance and we're changing it now. If we find that it is unworkable with this new ordinance, and I would hope that we could get some reports possibly about how it goes, then if we see fit to make further changes, we can always do that. I think that's the way I'm going to approach it in terms of making these the amendments to the proposed ordinance. So I guess I would ask that if you all, from the police department could give us a report at some point about how it is working and, you know, are you seeing new challenges or are you finding, you know, and maybe one of the things, you know, with this Ride Illinois Silver Certificate, maybe they don't even know about that kind of thing. So, you know, I would like to know, you know, after a period of time, whatever seems reasonable, 6 months, a year, how things are going with the ordinance that we do vote on. Make sense?
Okay. I just had a quick question, Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead, Trustee Gilbert.
And so in terms of Trustee Manganaro's point, accessibility, what we're essentially saying with how it's written now, it's not that younger kids can't use these scooters, they just can't go over 10 miles an hour, correct? Is that what we're looking at? So we're not trying to take these things out of their hands, we're just saying they can't go over 10 miles an hour, so they might have to leave a little earlier.
For standard devices, as I understand the change, you wouldn't be able to use a standard device unless you had that certificate, you know, and/or were over a certain age.
Well, as it currently sits, so you need a learner's permit at 16 to operate it, right?
Or be 18, right.
Okay, and so what we're trying to change is say that if you're younger than that, you can do that with the silver certificate program.
For a standard device,
That's
yes.
the motion.
Yeah.
Got it.
And one more thing, I think it should be noted, in my mind, one of the things that's weighing heavy on me is Trustee Schwingbeck, when we talked about this the first time, or the last time, I should say, the 16-year-old or 18-year-old was part of the motion that he made. And I know he was pretty passionate about the fact that sometimes a 16-year-old who hasn't gone through any driver's ed really doesn't pay attention to the rules of the road very well. But that's why his idea of a learner's permit means that you are avidly going through rules of the road. And so to me, that kind of weighs heavy on my mind as well. Maggie, if you could please call the roll.
Trustee Dunnington?
Yes.
Trustee Zyck?
Yes.
Trustee Manganaro?
Yes.
Trustee Gilbert?
No.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Santa Maria?
Yes.
Trustee Bertucci?
No.
President Tinaglia?
No.
3 nays, 5 yeas.
All right, motion carries. So the changes will be made to the ordinance as outlined by Mr. Passman, and then will it come back to us for a final vote, or is this it?
That was your final vote.
That was
Is there a final vote? Okay.
We will, the plan always was after adoption of an ordinance, we will begin the communications campaign. Obviously, this is a big component of this in terms of what the rules are and so on and so forth. And so we will adjust that based on the ordinance that was approved.
All right, very good. All right, then I think we're on to the new business, which is why most people are here today. And before we get started on this, I think we're going to have a little discussion from staff. Manager Recklos?
Yep. Okay, just give me 1 second here. Okay. Oh, thank you, Mayor. You know, obviously, the issue of federal agencies such as ICE and the U.S. Border Protection Agency has been a major issue in the news and within our community in recent months. We've received a lot of emails of concern, you know, visits and phone calls from neighbors based on images in the news of federal agents engaging in enforcement activities in the area or even within our own community. This is a challenging, divisive issue, particularly when some of the images seem to suggest that some of the federal agents may not be following federal law in the way that they conduct their business. And people are understandably asking themselves and community leaders, what can we do? And so for these reasons, the village board raised the issue at our last meeting on November 3rd and directed staff to research legislative and regulatory options for the board to consider. Staff has done some additional research and has a recommendation for action tonight, which we'll go through. To preface this, as we noted at our last meeting, from a local government perspective, there are limited avenues for actual enforcement of rules when a federal agency is involved. In most cases, federal law enforcement agencies cannot be limited by local authority in the fulfillment of their mission. While they, like us, are subject to the rule of law, it is federal law that they're subject to, and the village is not authorized to engage in or responsible for the enforcement of federal laws. So as an example that's unrelated to this that I've used before, the U.S. Army base that's on Central in town, when they want to do work on their building and they've done additions, they've done renovations and so forth, they're not subject to village building permit rules, zoning. They don't pay taxes. They don't pay any fees. They can do that work any way that they see fit, with or without our input and support. And during my time, 11 years on the board, they've never sought it because they're a federal agency and they're just not subject to our authority when it comes to the fulfillment of their mission. If federal law enforcement breaks the law, they are held accountable by federal courts, not local adjudication or state courts where our cases go. So the question is not really whether the village government can prevent these federal authorities from operating. The question is, what kind of guidance and direction can we give to our staff on how to interact with federal law enforcement if those interactions occur? For our law enforcement personnel, the state of Illinois has already taken steps to define local and state police departments' limitations in working with federal law enforcement in civil immigration enforcement cases via the Illinois Trust Act and the Way Forward Act. And so these two laws are very clear, and they prohibit our sworn law enforcement personnel from sharing information with federal immigration agents, stopping, arresting, searching, or detaining a person solely based on individual citizenship or immigration status, complying with immigration detainers, inquiring about or investigating the citizenship or immigration status or place of birth of any agency within our custody was otherwise stopped or detained by our law enforcement folks, transferring individuals into immigration custody without a criminal warrant, allowing immigration agents access to state and local facilities for investigative or enforcement purposes, or entering into immigration enforcement agreements with immigration authorities. Both of those laws only apply to our sworn law enforcement personnel. And our police department have been trained and are provided with continual updates on their obligation under these two acts. So when we had this discussion back on the 3rd, this was something that was evolving very rapidly in our area, and we began to get questions from our employees. What if this happens, or what if that happens? And there were examples in neighboring communities of some of the scenarios that could play themselves out. For example, if Border Patrol or ICE agents, wanted to use village, facilities for their operations. And on a civilian basis, those types of things are not outright prohibited by the Trust Act and the Way Forward Act. And so what we did in the interim is we thought about this from a staff perspective, and we issued the interim village policy on federal civil immigration enforcement. And it was issued to all village employees on November 6th. It acknowledges a few things and provides some guidelines and direction to our staff on how to interact with federal authorities on these issues. And it acknowledges that federal immigration enforcement officers cannot be prevented from operating in any space open to the public at large. Federal agents, whether, we want them there or not, or whether we, approve of the manner in which they're engaging in their activities, can't be prevented by local authorities from operating in any space that's generally open to the public at large. And so that's, rights of way, sidewalks, roads, public parking lots, public buildings that, where folks have access to it broadly. We also indicated that village employees should not grant access to village immigration or enforcement officers to private areas of village buildings or facilities without a warrant. And so what's an example of that? So there, we have various parking lots on the municipal campus. We have parking garages and parking lots that are open to the public at large, where anyone can park there. And we have ones that are restricted, for example, only to police vehicles or fire vehicles, where a member of the public cannot park there. What we're saying is we do not have the authority to prevent them from parking or utilizing a public parking lot, but we can tell them they're not welcome to use our facilities that are not open to the public. By the same token, if a federal agent wanted to walk through the lobby of Village Hall, they could. If they wanted to walk to where our back offices are, where you have to get a pass, we can deny them entry unless they have a warrant. If they have a warrant, obviously they have to be granted access. What about information? While again, sharing of information is pretty well regulated in the Trust Act and the Way Forward Act for law enforcement personnel, we wanted to provide similar guidance to our employees that are not in law enforcement. So village employees under these rules should not provide information to federal immigration enforcement officers that wouldn't be offered to a member of the public. If they request any information we wouldn't provide automatically to a member of the public, they should fill out a Freedom of Information request, just like anyone else would. If federal immigration enforcement officers do gain access to areas where they're not permitted, the rule is that the ranking employee for that facility would ask them to leave. If they refused, we would call 911 so the police department can document that incident, and the village then can consider further action if appropriate. And further action in such a case would be looking at options within the federal court system. The flip side of this is a village employee should also not interfere with a federal investigation, as that is a felony. And the other thing is village employees may continue in their duties in the vicinity of an incident if safe. And so if there is a 911 call that is for injured individuals as a result of or adjacent to some sort of incident, our paramedics would still respond and treat all individuals involved regardless of their status, regardless of what side of any issue they were on, because again, that's our duty to provide that type of service. That's the gist of that policy as we developed it. So staff feels that policy as written takes things about as far as we think are appropriate in terms of we eliminate any of the guesswork that staff would have if a situation like this presented themselves, but we also recognize our limitations in our inability to regulate federal officials engaging in their work. And so, what are the different options that can be taken? The board can direct staff to draft an ordinance on this issue. Typically, ordinances are an enforceable action, like the ordinance we just passed on e-bikes, or a change to the village code, which also carries the weight of law. You could direct staff to draft a resolution, which a resolution is typically kind of a statement of intent or values by the village board, but it generally does not carry the weight of law behind it. The last thing you can do is you could direct staff to make this interim policy permanent. The advantage of that is whereas we would have to draft an ordinance or resolution under these other cases would come back for another discussion. Directing staff to make the interim policy permanent would go into effect immediately, and having it as a policy level, because village management issues policy directives to staff all the time, would allow modifications quickly by staff if new information came to light, new situations we hadn't anticipated came to light. We could modify that very quickly, as we did with this interim policy when it was first drafted. So from a staff perspective, our recommendation is to direct staff to make the interim policy regarding federal civil immigration enforcement permanent. However, the board obviously can make an alternative motion to direct staff to draft an ordinance or resolution regarding the federal civil immigration enforcement in Arlington Heights. But with that, we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Manager Reckloff. That was really well said and very helpful and informative. Let's go to the village board and ask questions. Anyone on this side? Trustee Santa Maria?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any questions, but I do have a statement. Tonight, I rise not just as a village trustee, but as a neighbor, a mother, and the daughter of immigrants who understands deeply what it means to feel safe or unsafe in the place that you call home. For months now, federal civil enforcement officials have been in our neighborhoods. Scarsdale, Northern Arlington Heights, Pioneer Park, side streets, cul-de-sacs, and even near our schools. They have shown up without warning, without transparency, and too often without proper warrants. What our neighbors and residents have experienced is not safety, it is fear. In these past weeks, people have been stopped on their morning walks. Children have seen armed agents near their playgrounds. A mail carrier just doing his job was thrown to the ground while trying to help a neighbor. These actions have created emotional, physical, and economic ripple effects throughout our community. People are missing work. Children are not going to school. Families are living with a trauma they did not ask for and they do not deserve. Last week, I visited Viator House of Hospitality, where young asylum seekers, youth with active cases, work permits, visas, and every legal right to be here are trying to rebuild their lives. Yet, even one of them have been taken. One was detained and put 100 miles away, even though he had a legal case of being here, and rightfully so, that he was here rightfully. The Chicago Tribune this week reported that less than 3% of the individuals taken in this recent raids had any criminal history. Less than 3%. We are tearing families apart and destabilizing our neighborhoods for no reason. So tonight, I am asking the village board to support an ordinance that would prohibit federal civil enforcement officials from using our village property to conduct these actions. This is a clear, lawful, and necessary step to protect the people of Arlington Heights and to uphold the values we claim to stand for. Our residents have been asking us for leadership. This ordinance is one we can deliver. And I ask all of us, if we see this happening and choose not to act, then what is our role? We are elected to protect our neighbors, all of them, to create conditions for safety and stability, to take a stand when something is wrong. It is not enough to say this isn't our jurisdiction. If it's not ours, then whose is it? Who will speak up when people in our community are being harmed? Local government is closest to its people, and when our residents are scared, confused, and calling us for help, silence is not leadership. This ordinance is not about politics, but it's about responsibility, about refusing to allow our municipal taxpayer-funded property to be used to facilitate actions that violate due process, erode trust, and traumatize families who are part of the fabric of Arlington Heights. So let us speak now, clearly, courageously, and with conviction, because our community deserves nothing less. So I move that the Village of Arlington Heights adopt an ordinance prohibiting federal civil immigration enforcement officials from using any village-owned property, facilities, or resources for the purpose of conducting civil enforcement operations. Thank you.
Second.
I appreciate the enthusiasm, but please. We have a motion and a second, right? Okay, further discussion. Trustee.
While you're on this side.
Yep.
I guess I just need some clarification. So are Hart and Randy, are we talking about village-owned that is, the way you described it, Randy, private? In other words, the police lot would be, and on an outside area that would be not available. Randy, your office, so on and so forth. Because I don't know that we can create an ordinance that would allow public, like, for example, the public parking garage, those types of areas. Is that correct?
You know, the board can obviously create whatever ordinance that it wishes to create. What we're suggesting is that we would have limitations on enforcing an ordinance that would restrict federal law enforcement authorities from accessing places that are open to the public at large.
Because what would happen? I mean, is it a discrimination thing, and then we find ourselves being sued by the federal courts, or?
I think Trustee Bertucci, to the manager's point, an area that is owned by the public body, the village, but is open to the public, and a street or sidewalk is probably the best example, then it's open to everybody, and that includes other governments, individuals, you name it. But as the manager noted, there are several public, village-owned properties and areas that are not open to the public, and those I do believe that the village does have the authority to restrict access to those areas in line with the policy the manager mentioned, and as Manager Reckles said, with an ordinance such as the one that I believe is the intent of the motion. And that would be my recommendation if this motion passes. That's unless you tell us otherwise. If this motion passes, the ordinance that I would recommend that comes back to you in 2 weeks would be discussing what I'll call non-public public property, if you understand what I'm saying.
Okay, so Carina, is that what is your intent, those areas that are not public?
Correct.
Okay, because otherwise it's a whole can of worms for what would be considered public property. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Trustee Dunnington.
Thank you, Mayor. Manager Reckles, I want to applaud you for recognizing the urgency and the need when you adopted that interim policy that on November 6th. So thank you. I do think that it is very important that our residents hear not just from the village manager, but from the village board on this issue. So I am in support of the ordinance. I also would like to see the village develop a web page for immigration resources. It would show our commitment to all residents. Northbrook has a great example for us. On their website, they have a welcoming statement. They have information about community rights and commitments, links to immigration resources, and frequently asked questions. For example, their website says, emergency help is for everyone. Police officers, firefighters, and paramedics in Northbrook will never ask about your immigration status when you call 911 or request help. Your safety always comes first. They also have a webpage with links to the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights and the North Suburban Legal Aid Clinic. They answer questions about whether an ICE can enter a place of worship and what to do if police or ICE come to your residence. I believe our residents deserve that same information from our board and staff. Thanks.
Okay. We'll go this direction. Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you. In addition, I think that the interim policy to staff should be made permanent. So I don't think that this proposed motion would do that. Am I would it, or? Because I see two things. I see the ordinance and then the direction to the staff as something. So is that something that can also be made permanent?
If the board wanted to, you could incorporate the language of the policy into the ordinance, or it could be done via separate motion, whatever the board would prefer.
And I would say it probably gets to this. I think you're right technically, Trustee LaBedz, but I haven't drafted it yet. Of course, we'll have to see where the motion goes. But as I think of this, and particularly having reviewed some similar legislation in other communities, functionally, this ordinance is a directive to staff because it's staff that manages and controls village property. It's also a message to the public, and that includes other government agencies as to what the village will not allow. But I think it probably ends up being folded into this if this motion passes.
Okay.
So we can be even more clear about that in an ordinance if that's the will of the board.
I would certainly want that to be the case, just to be sure that our staff, many of whom would not normally encounter situations, are clear about what they can or what they shouldn't do and so on and so forth. So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you, Trustee LaBedz. Anyone else on this side?
I'll go next. We'll go down the row.
After you.
Okay.
Trustee Gilbert.
Can you please go back to the legislative slide?
This one?
Look at that. Perfect. Well written. So my comments are going to be from a legal perspective and how I sort of see this. And Hart, if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. I'm not afraid to be wrong. I'm afraid to be uneducated. So what I see here, and I understand that the way that I see it is that when we talk about a resolution, it says it doesn't have a weight of law. I'm not sure if an ordinance has the weight of law here either, because in my opinion, it's really unenforceable. And if we walk through this, if federal agents were to take over a parking lot at the police station where only police cars could go, so it's private, essentially the police department wouldn't really have any enforceability to move them along other than asking, without us going to federal court to try to challenge the government. Is that true?
That is my sense, Trustee Gilbert.
Okay.
Let's put it this way. I do not recommend, and I imagine that the police department would agree, that we try to actively stop, if that's a scenario, actively stop federal agents in that scenario.
Correct.
The best and safest course would be to pursue an action in federal court. To my knowledge, and again, I know that many communities have adopted regulations, ordinances, resolutions similar to the ones being discussed here tonight. I'm not aware of any effort to enforce it in a scenario like you described. There was a case by the Village of Broadview concerning the obstruction of a village right-of-way right near the ICE facility in that community. I'm not sure that case isn't substantively different because of the nature of the obstruction. So I don't know how this would play out, but the recommended avenue or venue for enforcement, I should say, would be through a federal court action.
Correct. So, can you tell me what the difference then would be, an ordinance versus a resolution?
I think an ordinance is in the pecking order of local government actions. It is the highest form of what a village board or city council can do. I would say the slide is accurate in that resolutions often don't actually effectuate a change in law. It is a statement of values. Now, we use resolutions sometimes to approve agreements and the like, so there's not a tremendous difference between ordinances and resolutions from a functional standpoint. But certainly in terms of the heft of a message, an ordinance is a perceptively heftier action. Would there be a difference in what would happen on the ground, how the village might proceed? Not much of one, admittedly.
Okay. And that's one of my concerns, is if this board is going to put an ordinance into play, because they are essentially the highest letter of the law, do we want to do that with something that is essentially unenforceable? Is that the position we want to take? Just some devil's advocate arguments here as I walk through this. I'm not necessarily sure if it's, we reserve ordinances for things that we can actually enforce versus a resolution in a situation like this when both of them are relatively unenforceable, is my thought. Another thing to Carina's point, Trustee Santamaria, very well spoken. I respect every ounce of what you said. And I also want to make it clear to the people who are watching and listening that a lot of those things, regardless of what we do here, will still likely go on. The majority of emails that I've gotten have said, keep ICE out of Arlington Heights, and we don't have the power to do that. So I don't want anybody to be lulled into some sort of false sense of security that everything is okay, regardless of what happens here tonight, because we cannot keep these agents out of Arlington Heights. What we can try to do is not allow them to use a small pocket of property. We can't even do that. We can tell them we'd rather they didn't. But in terms of enforceability, there's just not much we can do. So I just want people to be aware of that, because again, the crux of the statements I have been getting are keep them out. And I want people to know we can't. So they will still be here regardless of what happens. And I just think that should be known to the public in terms of education and everything that's going on here. So again, I think the enforceability will be difficult regardless of what we do. Based on, we're looking at a tax levy. We have a grocery tax. We have a streaming tax. I would find it difficult to sit in this chair and direct the village to spend tens of thousands of dollars to file a federal lawsuit to have federal officers leave Randy's office. I think that could be considered a waste of resources and time. So I think when we think about this and we walk it through, we're going to put this in place. How will we handle this if and when? You know, not indicative of how I would vote on this, but just things I want us to think about and the public to think about in terms of if this gets passed and if the federal agents decide to not listen to it, what will you ask us to do? And how will we proceed with it from there? So just some thoughts.
Trustee Manganaro?
Yes, and actually, I think in some ways that's kind of a perfect segue to some questions that I had for you, Mr. Passman. We spoke on Friday and we discussed a number of these issues, not the least of which was the enforceability aspect. Just a couple of things, as you mentioned, I am counting, depending on where the village of Palatine is ahead of us or behind us, we would be the 10th or 11th municipality in the Chicago area to enact through executive order, ordinance, or proclamation some sort of an edict, for lack of a better word, to prohibit civil immigration enforcement activities on our property. And the one thing that they have in common, and with Trustee Santa Maria's acquiescence, I would suggest that we strike the word federal, because as we discussed, there is case law where that could be construed as discrimination against the federal government, may make things less more likely. I think nothing is enforceable, but I think it makes it more likely. I think there's a reason that every other municipality has left the word federal out, because it's more general to state civil immigration enforcement. Myself, I think it's a small change, but it may or may not matter. The other couple of things, I think if we go in that direction, I do believe there's a couple of incompatibilities to the policy. One is the entire first paragraph, and I'm going to ask another hypothetical. Mr. Reckloss, if under the policy currently, because what spurred the resolution in Wheeling was ICE agents coming to a fire station and asking if they could use the parking lot for a staging area. And so under this policy, if they showed up at Station 1 and said they wanted to use the parking lot, we would say, yes, you may.
No.
Okay, help me understand that.
The parking lot, if they're asking to use the parking lot that is accessible for, we have parking lots that are public parking lots for members of the public, and we have parking lots that are for fire business or village business. We would say you're not engaging in village business or fire department business, and so we would say, no, you're not permitted to use this particular parking lot.
And similarly, we have parking structures for which we have defined an acceptable use, and any
Yes.
other use is prohibited. And so we do have the right to control our property and define what is an acceptable and a prohibited use.
Yes, what we would say, like for example, in the Vail Garage, within the Vail Garage, there's different categories of parking. There are parking spaces that are available to the public at large and ones that are just for residents. If they were parking in one of the resident spaces, we would say, you're not permitted to park here because you're not a resident. But if they were going to park on the top of the 5th floor, we would permit that the way we'd permit anyone else that was engaging in any other, business of their choosing.
I think it's important that we take this kind of an action for a variety of reasons, and Trustee Santa Maria described many of them very clearly. The need to support our immigrant communities is chief among them for me. And I do believe it's important for this board to have the courage to take some further action. If nothing else, and one of the reasons that I'm asking you these questions is I believe that it's really important for, should any of this occur, no, I am not asking for any of our sworn officers to attempt to interfere. But I do think I believe it's the fourth paragraph where the ranking employee in any facility should be documenting, speaking, recording and reporting, because I do think it's important to identify these situations and report them to the State's Accountability Commission. The day after we spoke about this before, there was a report on a bulletin sent out by the FBI requesting that ICE start identifying themselves and stop masking themselves because criminals are using their tactics to commit crimes. I think we have to do anything and everything that we can, and I do want to encourage members of the public to feel free to call 911 because our police will show up to verify. We may not have the ability to interfere, and we will not interfere, but we will verify. There are people committing crimes under the guise of pretending to be immigration enforcement, and I think that's something that we have to be prepared to deal with and report. And I don't feel anyone in our community should be afraid to do that. Thanks very much. I certainly will support the resolution, and Trustee Santa Maria, I will defer to you about whether the word federal stays in or not.
Thanks, Trustee Manganaro. Trustee Zyck?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. First of all, Trustee Dunnington had stated, Randy, we had that last meeting on the 3rd, and by the 6th, you would put out the interim policies and put on social media. And I do want to thank you for that quick action. That was showing responsiveness, and thank you for doing that. I've got a couple questions here, but I'm going to reiterate a story that I actually said a couple weeks ago. I know somebody who's here, who's a citizen in Arlington Heights, an immigrant. Bless you. And they're doing everything right. They've got the green card. They've done it all, everything right. They're a citizen. Well, they've done the right stuff as far as being a green card and doing all the immigration stuff. So they're here. And they're married to somebody who is a lifetime Arlington Heights resident. The lifetime Arlington Heights resident looks like all of us. The person who's an immigrant doesn't look like all of us. And the issue that this person has is that they're worried. They're worried, even though they've done everything right, that something's going to be happening, and they're going to be picked up. And that's why there's so much passion. That's why there's so much just wanting to do something like this on this board. So that's why I'm behind this ordinance. I will get to the point about the federal in a second, because I do agree with you on that. So I do agree that this is the right thing to do. And it affects, with that example I gave, it affects everybody. It potentially affects everybody in this community. That's why we have to do it. We have to show leadership as a board on what we think is right to protect everybody here. Now, a couple questions, Hart. You mentioned the Broadview situation. And as I'm understanding this, the federal judge intervened because there was fences going up around the Broadview facility that were going out onto the public streets, and it was impeding, if an emergency vehicle wanted to come by, it was impeding something like that, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. So I'm just thinking, but we also made a comment that we can't do anything where it's a public venue, where if we're allowing the public to be there, we can't stop any other type of government agency from going on there. But I got thinking to myself, this scenario, let's say somebody's having a bunch of people over and they have everybody come and they all park in the middle of the street, and everybody parks there in the middle of the street. That's probably something that's going to get looked at, and we're going to stop it. We're going to approach it and say, no, you can't be there. Okay, so I think it feels to me like that's a little bit of a loophole, if that's the right word. With that we can enforce things on a public roadway. All right, does that make sense?
Yes, and I'd say I think maybe I'll liken it both the Broadview matter, and as I understand it, the same way you described it, Trustee Zyck, and the example Manager Reckloss gave with the Vail Garage. We wouldn't allow anybody to build a fence across a village street without permission. We just, pick any street in the community, we wouldn't allow that. That is just as true for a federal agency as it is for our residents or visitors. Similarly, if a federal vehicle, a state government vehicle, a county vehicle, they want to park on the 5th floor of the Vail garage, if they want a 2-hour parking, paved parking, whatever it is, they can do that. They can't park in a residence space. So areas that are open to the public, the rights of anybody are the same in that regard, and the limitations are the same. That's true on our streets as well.
If there's one distinction I would make, and Mr. Passman, correct me if I'm wrong, as sometimes I am. If you had a bunch of private residents that were blocking in the middle of the road for a party, as you point out, Trustee Zyck, the difference is our police department, with full within their rights, could go, take enforcement action against those individuals if need be, tow the vehicles, ticket the individuals, and/or if they were, resisting vehemently, arrest them. The only recourse we would have if a federal agency engaged in this is federal court. So that's the distinction between those two.
Okay, thank you for that. So let me go on to the next point. The word federal, and I do agree with Trustee Manganaro with that particular one. One thing that I got thinking about was all of our facilities, whether it's the police department, whether it's the fire department, public works, anything that would come within this ordinance, they're there for a reason. They're there to do the bidding, the job that they are supposed to do for the community. And if we have I'm going to say an other government entity comes in and impedes that, that's an issue. That's an issue. So I think one of the things, whether or not you're considering the particular issue, which I know a lot of you have emailed and are probably going to be talking about tonight, it's just looking at impeding the jobs that we're supposed to be doing. And I think one thing that this ordinance can potentially do is set that up, saying, hey, look, we don't want to have, we need to do our jobs, and we can't have the interference of somebody else coming in here and just whenever they want to, being able to set up shop there and impede that. So I think regardless of whether you're in agreement with maybe some of the why behind what's going on there, which I am in agreement with the why, I just want to put that out there, there are other issues why having an ordinance like this does make sense. And I'm looking forward to hearing everybody's views, and I may have some other comments afterwards, but thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone else? Trustee Bertucci?
I just wanted to make a point that I agree with Trustee Gilbert, though, and that is I want to put it out there that in some sense we are creating this false sense of security, that their federal agents can still go about their business. So while I agree with such a policy to keep them off of our village property for staging purposes or anything else, my concern is that an ordinance would just be window dressing. And, are we putting our police department in a predicament by doing that? Or are we making a statement knowing that the enforceability of it at the moment is just not there? Basically, if we have a resolution, can we still document it and try to resolve it or prevent it in the future in federal court with a resolution? Or do we need an ordinance to go that far?
I'm not sure it's going to make a difference. Again, I'm not aware of any efforts yet to enforce one or the other, so I can't say with any certainty that one is going to weigh more on a court than not.
And to Trustee Gilbert's point, are we going to spend time and a lot of dollars to say, shame on you, this is what you did, and are, you know, and they're, by that time, which they're very close to, from what I understand, is moving on to a different city anyway. But, I mean, I'm in favor of this. I just want to reiterate what Trustee Gilbert was saying is, let's be sure that we're not creating this false sense of security. But if it makes the statement of the support of the village board, so be it.
Trustee Gilbert.
Yeah, just, you know, some things to think about too. Again, I think about precedent, you know, and whether or not this village board has ever tried to do anything in relation to a federal or a state directive or anything that was passed down before. And if we do this, how will we have to address, how will we address future federal or state mandates or laws or directives, and will we be required to address them? You know, and maybe that's okay. Maybe when the time comes, we should. And to Trustee Bertucci's point, you know, maybe this is window dressing. Maybe this is unenforceable, and you know, all we're doing is saying shame on you guys. You know, shame on you. You know, there's a right way and a wrong way to do things, and I think we've all seen a lot of the times when things are done wrong. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing for us to say that we're not okay with that aspect of it, you know. So again, my comments here are purely just to stir the pot, so to speak, bring some ideas to the front of people's brains that might not have been there. And these are things that I think that we're going to have to tackle. These are the ripple effects that are going to come from this meeting. And so we should just be prepared for that as we carry on down the road, so to speak. So that's it.
Thank you, Trustee Gilbert. Anyone else?
Okay, I have a big stack of blue cards here, and I'm prepared to call on every one of them, and everyone will get 3 minutes to speak. If you haven't noticed, it looks like the board is going to be in favor of this motion and this resolution or this ordinance. It may actually be unanimous. And I guess it's your choice if we're going to be here till 11 o'clock, or are we going to be moving on with this? That's not anything other than just the obvious here. My perspective on what I've heard and what I believe is that I do agree with everything that's been said here. It's a shame that we're having to talk about this kind of a thing in America. It's embarrassing that this is where we are. At the same time, I do not want those officers in the middle of a fist fight in a parking lot over who can or can't be there. I don't want to spend tens or hundreds of $1,000s having some argument in a federal court about something either. So maybe what we've done here so far that has been wonderful is what staff has already done with this policy that was posted as an educational program. It can be carried on farther, as Trustee Dunnington has requested, and more information on the web about people's rights and how to get information. It will be carried on further today on either a resolution or an ordinance, it looks like, from my straw polling in my brain. And I think that's fine. I think it's important to know, though, what you've heard from a couple of us up here, it may be just a warm blanket right now, unenforceable beyond what we've been talking about. In either case, it's probably okay to do. Manager Recklaus, Mr. Passman, is there any downside? If we were to pass a unanimous ordinance tonight that says we don't like this and this is what we think, what could be the downside to that? Is there anything?
One question, you know, just a point of clarification. Are we talking about passing an ordinance tonight or directing staff?
I'm sorry. Yes.
I just want to make sure we're all on the same. Okay.
I'm jumping ahead.
No, there's a couple of other comments, and we were conferring, making sure we understand the direction of the board. But from my standpoint, no.
There's no real downside to it. So to be clear to the audience and everyone else at home listening, having staff, the item number 3 on this legislative option could happen immediately, and it's just approving what is already out there and making it permanent. But the other 2 are going to have to be drafted and then come back, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We would aim to have them back on your agenda for December 1st.
Okay. And so was the motion that was made to draft? I'm sorry, I want to go right ahead and reiterate if you don't mind.
Sure. Okay. I move that the Village of Arlington Heights draft an ordinance prohibiting civil immigration enforcement officials from using any village-owned property, facilities, or resources for the purpose of conducting civil enforcement operations.
Okay. So that would be what would happen next if this vote is taken and done. And can we clarify, there was discussion on publicly accessible village property versus privately accessible village property. Do we all agree there are 2 types? Manager Recklouse?
Yes. I mean, that's the distinction drawn by staff, but again, the board can pass whatever ordinance it so chooses.
Okay. So is the motion tonight all village property or?
Using any public, I can change it to using.
I'm
any
sorry?
Public village. Any public village-owned property, facilities, or resources.
Okay, because we know that the privately owned ones are off limits already. So this motion is for.
The public.
Like the parking lot across the street here.
Correct.
That's not in the building and not in the garage. It's out there on the corner.
Correct.
To prohibit them from using the public facilities, or saying that we would be prohibiting them from using the non-public?
From using any public village-owned property. So the non-public use that has already prohibited without a warrant.
Okay, so that's kind of, we're boiling this down here now. Everything else, I think we all agree on, and we all understand as where this motion is going. Now, what I want to make sure we understand is what Trustee Santa Maria is requesting is that all village property, the open parking lot across the street, for example, or any other space like that, the spaces in the parking garage that you spoke about, Manager Recklouse, that were for retail shoppers, if we own it, they can't use it. As opposed to the back half of the parking lot that's only for police car parking or fire truck parking or something like that, we would call that private.
Yeah,
Public.
Limited use or village
Right.
use, facilities, right? Okay. And I guess a point of clarification, would this ordinance is the intent to extend to public rights of way as well, sidewalks and roads?
Yeah, so I think well.
I think that would be completely unenforceable.
Yeah.
I mean, that just takes it to a level that,
Well,
it's almost
let's do this.
laughable.
Let's do this.
That was not the original intent of my.
And I'm just want to make sure we
That was not
understand how
the
to draft
intent of
it.
my
All right.
motion.
So it's not sidewalks and streets. Your ordinance is really just those privately owned properties, like parking lots and things like that.
Correct, or
But
village
all of
owned.
them.
Yes.
But all of them, not just those that are special use.
Correct.
Okay. Now that we know that that's what this is, let's run through the board here one more time and make sure people on this, before I go to the audience, make sure everybody understands that part of it, because I don't know that I understood that before. Okay? Who would like to ask questions?
Can I ask one more point of clarification?
Yeah.
When we say publicly owned, do we mean owned by any public entity?
Owned by the Village of Arlington
Owned by the
Heights.
village, okay.
That's so anything owned by the Village of Arlington Heights,
All right.
So I have a
village-owned
question.
property.
Okay, we're going to go to the board, back to the board here just for a dialogue on that specific item. Trustee Gilbert.
Thank you. So what would be can we just use that parking lot across the street as an example? Because it's just easier to point to that one, right? I mean, it's village-owned property, but the public can park on it, and so anybody can park on it, but the village owns it.
Right.
How is that different than a street or a sidewalk?
You want to try that one?
One difference is that a street is a traditional public forum. You know, in fact, it is the most traditional public forum, and so, you know, generally the place we can restrict people the least is in a street, and the sidewalk's part of the street. The parking lot across the street, to use that example, is fundamentally a plot of land that we own in our ownership capacity. So it's different in that regard.
In terms of enforceability here,
not much. Well, and again, with the caveat that we have not seen efforts to enforce a restriction such as applying, you know, a no immigration enforcement in a parking lot. So I can't point to a case and say here's how it shakes out.
Anyone else? Trustee LaBedz.
So just further clarification, like the train station, the parking lots at the train, they're owned by us.
Right.
Um,
The train stations themselves,
we own,
the village owns. Right.
owns that. Okay, okay. Well, I just did want to make one additional comment, and I do think it's important, not just we stand with our community, but we stand with our fellow communities in making a statement, because I think there's, that makes an important point, that it's not just Arlington Heights, or it's not just Wheeling, or it's not just Northbrook, not just Palatine, but we as a community, because we all live with contiguous borders, and we come and we go, and our school districts overlap, and the activities that we do, we shop, we go to restaurants, they're all overlapping, and that we stand together, I think, is an important piece of all of this.
Trustee Gilbert again.
yeah, sorry. So what is there any fallout from saying that parking lot, even though the public has access to it, would be off limits?
Unknown at this time.
Unknown at this time. Do the waters get deeper and murkier as we head out towards that parking lot?
To the extent that, as we've discussed, that it is generally open to the public as compared to the police department lot that is not, to that extent, then yes, unavoidably. But what's the final conclusion? That's what I can't. I just don't know how that'll play out.
Yes, that's the $1 million question.
Okay, anyone else? Trustee Bertucci.
So, I think this is just even further window dressing, but let me see if I can help justify why we would maybe do something. So that parking lot, for example, is that a commuter parking lot, or is that similar to the Vale Garage where anybody can park there and do 2 hours?
Depends on the time of day.
Come on, Randy. You're
Going to give you an honest answer, Trustee Bertucci.
Okay. So, because it would seem to me, going with your logic about, is it fire in the fire parking lot situation? Is it fire business? Is it, if it's for just village business that you could park there, then I can see how maybe we could stretch that. But if it's anybody can park there for 2 hours, 4 hours, whatever the time limit is at certain times, and go across and shop or do whatever you got to do. Again, we could say this and we could all feel good, and we can all be able to say yes, we voted for this, and make people feel better about it. But again, the reality is I have a problem sometimes with putting ordinances and laws in place just to make myself feel better, and then in return have a false sense of security for the community. So, I'm concerned about this part of it, because I was thinking initially that this was just going to be more of those private areas. So that's where my thought is right now.
All right, I don't think anything has changed since I spoke a few minutes ago. So I'm going to give you guys a thought. If you believe what you're hearing, what you're seeing makes sense, and you just want to stand up and say your name and say, I concur, or you want to say something else very different, please do. But I don't know that, I have 30 cards here. And if everybody takes 3 minutes, we're going to be here a long time. Okay? But you all have the right to do that. So the first. All right, we're not having a dialogue here. I'm just sharing thoughts with you. I'm going to read the first name, and I'm going to read the second name as the person on deck. And it's up to you to do what you would like to do. The first one is Christopher. It's either Melby or Welby, and on deck is Jean or Jeannie Cosgrove. So Christopher?
Thank you. This conversation's been very interesting, and I really appreciate everybody taking the seriousness with this. My wife Carol and I would like to strongly urge the Village of Arlington Heights Board to adopt a policy forbidding ICE, DHS, and the Border Patrol from using village property to conduct their raids. These agencies are operating in an illegal, unconstitutional, un-American, and inhumane manner. Masked agents with no identification or warrants are kidnapping and terrorizing people. This is unacceptable behavior for a civilized democracy. Arlington Heights must make it clear to all that it will not tolerate such abuses of human rights and be party to these reprehensible actions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, stop. We are not doing that. Okay? We're not doing that. Thank you. Jean, is it Jeannie or Jean? I'll pass. You'll pass? Okay, you are my friend, Jean. Amy is up, and on deck is Andy Greisimer.
I'll be quick. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No jumping ahead.
Thank you for letting us speak. I think people really want to say something, and I will cut what I was going to say, other than to say I respect and understand the staff recommendation to make the interim guidelines permanent. Obviously, a lot of thought went into that, but I would like you to do something stronger. And I request a proclamation similar to what other communities have done to reflect the will of Arlington Heights to speak against the overreach of the Department of Homeland Security and ICE patrolling our communities and scaring our residents. Their action make us all less safe. I recognize federal law supersedes local jurisdiction. We understand a proclamation, guideline, or even an ordinance is not going to change what ICE does or doesn't do in Arlington Heights. Yet Webster says a proclamation is an official announcement dealing with a matter of great importance. This is certainly an issue of great importance, and you can see that by the fact that 75 people stayed out late on a Monday night and listened to your conversation and still want their chance to talk. The village board this year already has issued 28 proclamations, and I respectfully ask that you issue a proclamation as a symbol of your commitment to the safety and security of this community. We need to protect our police officers, first responders, small businesses, and neighbors. Please show us that it matters for all of us. While the original guidance was important, I really urge you to take it a step further. Issue the proclamation to demonstrate your commitment to stand up for us and for each other. That is what good government, good friends, good business partners, and the village of Arlington Heights as a village of good neighbors always should do for us. Thanks.
Thank you, Amy. Come on. I'm asking nicely, please. Let's not do that. Andy, you're up, and on deck is Kim Hogan.
I can be quick. So I do concur, but I also want to say, I mean, it just says who we are as a village, and like, who do we want to be as as Arlington Heights residents? I mean, we look at the other communities near us that are doing this. I think it's just being on the right side of history. So,
Thank you, Andy. Kim is up, and on deck is Linda Weissy.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Board of Trustees, for letting me speak. This ordinance is, I strongly urge the board to pass it, join the other 9 or 10 communities that have done a same, passed a similar ordinance, and so far as I know, have not suffered any terrible repercussions from it. This is not window dressing. This is not shame on you. This is not to make me feel better. It's not to make any of the people here feel better. This ordinance is to support our immigrant community that is being terrorized by these armed thugs that are operating under the aegis of our federal government. I urge you to pass this as an ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Linda Weissy, and on deck is Janet McDonough.
Hi, this is Linda Wasey. I want to tell you about a woman that I've noticed on my walks. She's a white woman, very frail, bent over, and she's walking with the help of an Hispanic woman. It appears that the older woman has a caregiver who is with her every day. What a blessing for this elderly woman to find a dedicated and kind person to care for her. But I have no idea whether the caregiver is documented or undocumented, but it really doesn't matter. She takes this lower paying job. She is providing a needed service and paying taxes with her earnings. And it's in our self-interest to protect the people who are working in our town, providing the services we use, like caregivers, landscapers, people in the hospitality industry, and construction work. Immigrants, whether they're white, maybe they're Polish, or brown, maybe Hispanic, are being abducted in our town, and Arlington Heights is full of frightened people, many of whom are too scared to grocery shop. Hispanic grocery stores in Arlington Heights, like El Burrito on Arlington Heights Road and in Mount Prospect, are losing money, and this is affecting our economy. As mayor and trustees, it is your solemn duty to keep all residents safe, whatever that takes. And right now, ICE is roaming the streets looking for people to pick up and take away from their jobs and families. So I'm asking you to vote yes for an ordinance that will prevent federal immigration enforcement using public property and put signage out stating the above. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Next is Janet, and on deck is Janice Ferrers.
Yes, hi, I'm Janet McDonald. I'll keep this brief. Trust is easy to destroy and hard to build. This proposed ordinance to ban ICE from municipal property is a step in the right direction, and I do think that the welcoming and inclusive community pledge would be a further step in that direction that I urge you all to take. In response to unlawful, immoral acts of the federal government, our shared humanity calls on us to join together with local and state officials who refuse to stand by while masked men abduct our neighbors. This moment calls for courage and leadership. And I would second the idea that I would ask you not to think of this as window dressing, but I would reframe it as an important statement of solidarity taken in the hopes that courage is contagious. And I don't think you have to worry about any of us getting a false sense of security from this. I think we're not that foolish to believe that any of us are secure in the face of what's happening. So don't worry about that. That's not a problem. And as far as time and money spent defending our civil rights, I can think of few things more worthy of our time and money. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Janice, you're up, and Maggie O'Connor is on deck.
Sure. So this is more than a difference of opinion. This is a difference of morality. we can't turn a blind eye to this because you know who's really taking all this in is our kids. I'm going to sidetrack here for a moment and talk about how our kids, starting at like 5 years old, they undergo mass shooter drills at school. They're taught where to go and hide, how to block doors, how to stay away from windows, and practice not making a sound, practice silence, so the man with the assault weapon won't find you and kill you and your classmates. To huddle in closets, waiting for the man with an assault weapon to move on down the hall, that maybe if we're quiet, he won't kill us, and maybe if we're quiet, he'll move on down the hall. This is routine, and we don't know how this is going to affect them in the long run, their development, but now we can add in a significant multiplier. We have ICE. Because now prowling our streets are packs of minimally trained and heavily armed men. They wave assault weapons around, pointing guns at people in their faces, often with their fingers on the trigger. They look just like a school mass shooter. Everything we train our kids to run from, but in bigger numbers. They have hunting lists, like 10 brown people today. So they set out to hunt and brutally abduct these human beings. They don't know the names of their victims, and that doesn't matter. What matters is that they meet their quota, like snatching 10 brown people that day. Our kids see this. They see the men with the assault weapons hunt and slam adults to the ground. Everybody knows of a family affected by this fear and violence. This is big talk at every school. There are no polite words to describe this. These goons are an insult to our well-trained and extensively credentialed enforcement officers. These goons get a signing bonus and very little training. They get an assault weapon and carte blanche for brutal behavior and a shopping list. Make that a hunting list. ICE grabs people from work sites, landscapers, roofers. ICE hunts people at gas stations and grabs victims who are putting gas in their car. Many of them are American citizens, have green cards and work permits, but they aren't even allowed to show their IDs because that's not the point. All that matters is that they have brown skin, and that's who ICE is hunting today, right? This is abhorrent, and I'm begging you to do what is morally right. The moral thing to do tonight is to vote yes for an ordinance prohibiting the use of any Village of Arlington Heights property for civil immigration enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Up is Maggie O'Connor, and on deck is Robert Bueller.
Hello. I find it so fitting today that we open this meeting honoring the veterans of our country for defending freedom and democracy while upholding the values of our Constitution. As we consider the next action by the village, let us not forget those values and let the work of our veterans have been in vain. I understand that the village cannot make ICE leave, but we as a village can make it more difficult for them to terrorize our town. Board Member Gilbert questioned the precedent of such actions, but I think we can all agree we are in unprecedented times. Since ICE invaded our streets recently, our neighbors are terrified to drop their children at school, seek medical attention, access community resources, go to work, or to simply step outside their homes. Having to explain to my small children what to do if they see someone in tactical gear with a rifle detaining someone on a street does not coincide with the reasons why I moved to Arlington Heights. It is imperative that the village board does all in its power to protect and show support to vulnerable and diverse populations here in Arlington Heights. The interim policy in regards to this issue is a step in the right direction, but we cannot afford to leave this protection vulnerable to future change or interpretation, and it needs to be codified permanently as an ironclad village ordinance. Also, adding a proclamation against the horrific actions that have been taking place in our streets. I request that this board pass this ordinance now, or in 2 weeks, and affirm that the Village of Arlington Heights will not cede its authority to fear and racism and stand on the right side of history. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Robert Bueller, you up, and on deck is Mary Hahn.
And I'll be quick. And sometimes it's sometimes it's the principle of the thing and not the enforceability of the thing. And parking staging is not parking. But anyway, I'm a little bit nervous. I'm here for you. October 30th at approximately 1:20 p.m., heavily armed ICE agents ran up on my property, arrested Muriel Medina, and assaulted my postal carrier, Mike. The Ring camera footage went viral, appearing on local news, soliciting calls from Congressman Quigley, USPS investigators, ICIRR, and many others. These unwelcome and uninvited guests left my daughter, who was home at the time, the remaining landscapers, and my mailman shaken, and Muriel's family forever changed. Mike had to lock himself in his mail truck and call 911 to avoid his own arrest. Mike considered Muriel a friend who brought him bottled water when it was hot and would grab the mail if their trucks were blocking the mailbox. I did not know Muriel, but have since become friends with his daughter Estella. Muriel has lived in the area for over 20 years. He is a father and a grandfather. He is a hard worker with jobs at McDonald's and the landscaping business. He missed the birth of his latest granddaughter while he was incarcerated. His daughter, worried about her father, is texting me while in active labor. I'm angry and saddened that my property played a role in this politically motivated targeting of the Chicago area and the racial profiling of landscapers and others randomly working in our neighborhoods. And I'm most importantly upset at what this has done to the Medina family, which is probably the worst day of their lives. And my house that I've lived in for 25 years will always be remembered for this. So thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Up is Mary Hahn, and next is Nancy Eberhardt.
Hi, my name is Mary Hahn. I am a lifelong resident of Arlington Heights. I've lived in my current home for over 35 years, where I raised my 2 daughters. And I now have 4 grandchildren, 3 of which are Latino and are bilingual and who have been profiled here in Arlington Heights at their home and in Chicago. And these children are 9, 6, and 4. I want you to just think about that, what that does to a child to have a policeman come to them and accuse them of something they didn't do, but because of their color, they're suspect immediately. Not a good thing, okay? As a grandmother, it's a terrible thing. So I just want to make sure we all agree that ICE actions do not respect our rights as laid out in the 5th and 14th Amendments of our Constitution. They are not going after the worst of the criminals. My family is law-abiding. We all pay taxes. They wear masks. They wear military clothes. They don't always wear visible and proper IDs. They carry military-style weapons in residential neighborhoods. Disgusting. On top of all this, on September 8th, 2025, our Supreme Court of the U.S. said ICE is allowed to make immigration stops based on race and language. So if you sound or you look a certain way, if you have dark skin, like my grandchildren and my son-in-law, and you speak Spanish, like my son-in-law and my grandchildren, you are a target. So, as a tax-paying citizen, yes, I paid my tax bill today when I got home from vacation. I expect the Village of Arlington Heights to do its very best to keep all residents and visitors safe from ICE. Not only my Latino family and other Latinos in the area, but all negatively impacted by ICE agents and actions that disrespect our rights and when agents wear masks and carry military-style weapons in our neighborhoods. We have 3 more years of this federal administration. What other shenanigans and illegal actions are we going to be subjected to? For example, how will voters and election workers be kept safe and not intimidated during the upcoming elections? I am asking the village to immediately begin working collaboratively with neighboring municipalities, Chicago, the County of Cook, and the state, to develop and implement measures to not only keep the public safe, your primary responsibility and priority during unconstitutional ICE actions, but also to enact actions that anticipate what the heck else could happen over the next 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Nancy, you're up. And Renee Stanico is on deck.
I'll be brief and reduce what I was going to say. Thank you for letting me speak, and I want to say I appreciate the discussion of the board, and I would like to encourage you to take action on an ordinance and a proclamation. Words matter. I don't see that as window dressing. Words matter. It's really important to send the right message that you really are here for all residents. I just want to mention too, on a personal note, that my daughter-in-law is Hispanic. She no longer feels safe walking my grandson to school. She's now driving him, and my grandson asks why. To me, I'm heartbroken. I'm heartbroken for what they go through and for the fear that they're living every day in our communities. And as somebody else mentioned, it's very fitting that today we have this discussion on the day that we honored our veterans who fought so hard to protect our freedoms when they are being violated daily. So I think it's not window dressing, it's very important. One other point I want to make is to make sure that our police, we do not want to have anybody break the law or put themselves in so much danger. I understand that they're limited what they can do, but they do need to understand what it means to enforce the Trust Act. They do need to be educated on what they legally can do. And our village employees need to ask for warrants and whatever. I mean, I'm not saying they should stand in the middle of a fight, but it's okay to ask and it's okay to document and it's okay to call the police to say they are violating our laws and they're violating federal law at times too. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. Renee is up, and Jenna Josephowski is on deck.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to speak with you today. Bertucci, Tinaglia. I'm sure you're familiar with the term WAP, without papers. I'm here today for my ancestors who were undocumented. I'm here for my father who went to school here, who looked like some of the men that were abducted. We are honoring veterans today, but there is an erosion of the meaning of the phrase to serve and protect, along with the social contracts and rights afforded to us by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Citizens in Skokie and Little Village are forming patrols and teams to ensure safe pickup at schools. These are services typically performed by police. We facilitate these services through our taxes. I'm here today to demand that Arlington Heights establish a hotline for residents. I also demand Arlington Heights join forces with other municipalities to pursue legal actions against DHS and ICE for the misconduct against our citizens. Mr. Gilbert said perhaps that it was a waste of money. Well, sir, people have spent their lives, spent their blood, lost their family. Portland police effectively sued the Trump administration to stop more National Guard from moving into the city. It's not unrealistic to think we can create change through legal action. NBC4 has an article that states that 3,000 individuals have been disappeared. Tours of the Broadview facility show inhumane conditions. I think we can do a little bit better than a resolution or an ordinance. If we do nothing, we are laying the groundwork for increased bullying. If our police sit idly by, who will protect us when it is our turn? Our grandfather stood up to fascism. I have a picture of my grandfather surrounded by skulls in Japan. What did he sacrifice? What will we sacrifice to stop fascism?
Thank you, Renee. All right, so I'm going to ask this one last time. Please stop with the applause, okay? We all get it. Please stop. Jenna, you're up, and on deck is Patty Cruzius.
Hi. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I have all sorts of things to say that very much echo every single thing that has come out of every single person's mouth that has spoken thus far. So yes to all of that. What I'd like to do with you right now is share a personal story with you that I'm actually sharing on behalf of one of my neighbors. I live right down the street on Pine Avenue. I could walk here from my house. And walking my dog the other week, I spoke with one of my neighbors who informed me about a situation in which construction workers were out in front of a neighbor's house on our street, and ICE came onto her property. And she was in the house alone with her infant. She heard pounding on the door, screaming. She thought somebody chopped off their hand or something. No, it was ICE trying to get away. Or, excuse me, it was the workers trying to get away from ICE who was chasing them into her house. She's not an immigrant. She's a citizen. She was just standing by. And I think a lot of us are in this situation right now thinking that this could not possibly happen to me or my family. You think that you're safe. Some of you think that this is window dressing. Great. Dress the windows. You know what? We're not doing this for ourselves. I'm not here to make myself feel good. I'm here to make sure that the people that I know in this town and care about who are immigrants feel safe here. To echo what Maggie said, we are in unprecedented times. And if we're just going to sit here and say, well, it's not going to matter, we can't enforce it, what should we do? Well, then what are we doing here? What are we doing here if not to try to make a difference? I'm pretty sure that's why all of you are sitting up here tonight, because you wanted to make a change. And I am begging you to consider not only what you would do if this happened to you, because it may. It's only a matter of time. I never thought that it would happen on my street, in my neighborhood. I also never thought that my neighbors right over there would have formed a neighborhood group chat of nearly 60 people. So many that can't even be here right now. I would have never imagined that on the day after this happened, I would have had to drive around the neighborhood, passing other moms in my neighborhood in minivans. I sat outside of my neighbor's house working on my laptop 2 Wednesdays ago so that her workers could finish brickworking her driveway because she couldn't supervise for ICE. That's not my job. I'm not getting paid for that, but you know what? I'm paying enough tax dollars, enough property tax in this town that perhaps the least you could do is to draft an ordinance, make a statement, be on the right side of history. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenna. Up is Patty Cruzius, and on deck is Allison Anderson.
I'll make this really brief. I'm in favor of everything that has been said so far. Please do everything you can to protect our neighbors. If that means an ordinance or resolution or all the information you can possibly give people to know what their rights are and what they can do to protect themselves, in addition to whatever you can do to protect them. Legally, whatever. Just do it, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Allison Anderson is up, and Father Corey Brent is on deck.
Hi, my name's Allison Anderson, and I've been a resident of Arlington Heights for 34 years. I concur with your resolution and our ordinance, and I oppose ICE use of Arlington Heights property and resources for immigration enforcement in our area. First, I want my local tax dollars to be used for Arlington Heights police and fire work. They shouldn't be involved in immigration enforcement actions, and our Arlington Heights resources should not be diverted for federal use. Second, our police force has a good relationship with the people of our village. I would not want to squander the good relationships between Arlington Heights Police and our residents by mixing ICE work with our local law enforcement. Third, in separate incidents, friends with darker skin than mine have been followed by an unmarked police car, have been asked if they speak Spanish, have been asked their nationality, and have been asked if they are citizens. This is creating a culture of fear, encouraging people to stay home, not shop, not eat out, avoid work and school. This will have an extreme negative effect on the economic vitality of the village of Arlington Heights. I think there is a great value in taking a stand and establishing a village position on this. Silence is assent. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Father Corey's up, and Daniel Cruzius.
Good evening. Father Corey Brost, member of the Clerics of St. Viator. We have called Arlington Heights the home of our national home of our order for many decades now. I want to thank you all for your service in these days, particularly as we've seen events unfold, ICE immigration efforts across the nation, and the way that ICE agents are dehumanizing people. I want to specifically thank the police force for their professionalism and the way they respect our citizens. I had nothing but positive interactions with our police force. And your professionalism really stands out right now. I stand in support of the ordinance, and I stand today to speak on behalf of Eli David Romero. He's a young man that I mentor who escaped violence in Venezuela. He has an active asylum case. He's 20 years old. He has a work permit. He was working in East Dundee, repairing a sign at a gas station for the job that he was hired to do when ICE agents pulled up and pulled him down and took him away, knowing, as they looked into their records, that he has an active asylum claim and a work permit. He's now in a county jail in Calhoun County in Michigan. I spoke to him, in fact, on the way here tonight. He calls every day. I try to keep his spirits up. His lawyers believe he has a strong case to get released, but it takes time for the judicial system to catch up with a rogue police force, which is what ICE has. So on his behalf, I say his name, and I say we need to be on the right side of history. I have great confidence in you as trustees to be on the right side of history. This is a time of moral reckoning. And as for enforceability, I'm also a lawyer. Rosa Parks didn't have the law on her side either. Thanks.
Thanks, Father. Daniel, you're up. And Brother Michael is on deck.
Hello, Arlington Heights trustees, Mayor Tinaglia, village staff. My name is Daniel Cruzius. I'm a lifelong 29-year resident of Arlington Heights. I would first like to thank the village for its interim policy regarding civil immigration enforcement activity in Arlington Heights. I also would like to thank the board for honoring veterans today. Arlington Heights is the village of good neighbors, and that means we are to be good neighbors to every neighbor, including our undocumented neighbors who are residents of Arlington Heights. Immigrants help make our community stronger, and immigrants contribute to society every day in Arlington Heights and the surrounding suburbs. I want to tell you a story, and I have been granted permission to tell the story, including names. I went to Harper College, and one of my closest friends was Nancy. Nancy was the president of the Harper College Honor Club. She is a brilliant student and a hard worker and a kind heart. She also is undocumented and is Latina and is part of the DACA program. She deserves to be safe and protected by the government. She is an amazing person and is an asset to this community and our patriotic country. Recently, she shared what happened to her cousin. He works in the Arlington Heights area or somewhat adjacent. A few weeks ago, he was going to get groceries at Jimenez Carniceria in Wheeling, but ICE took him. He was detained and was taken to a detention camp in Michigan. Can you imagine how disruptive this would be to Nancy's family? I hope everyone is praying for his safe release, and I am urging the Arlington Heights Village Board to take strong action to ensure ICE cannot set up operations on Arlington Heights Village property. Families are being devastated by this organization. I respect law enforcement, but we need to understand that ICE is not acting like a typical law enforcement agency. ICE has been shooting ministers with rubber bullets while praying and peacefully protesting. ICE has been arresting children with disabilities going to school at gunpoint. ICE has been tear gassing civilians exercising their constitutional rights peacefully. When they are not doing that, they are separating immigrant families, taking parents away from their children, or taking away someone's cousin. ICE has even detained citizens because somehow they look like an immigrant or racial profiling. Undocumented immigrants are God's children and contribute to society and pay taxes and should be protected. I'm proud that Arlington Heights has immigrants. They are special and make Arlington Heights a great place. Please take action to protect our immigrant residents of Arlington Heights. Thank you.
Nice timing, Daniel. You practiced that one. Excellent. Up is Brother Michael, and on deck is Megan Janowick.
Good evening. My name is Brother Michael Gosh. I'm the co-founder of Vider House of Hospitality. Thank you for visiting. And Trustee Santamaria, I couldn't have said it any better. Thank you so much. Perhaps some of you may regret the use of window dressing, as many of the people here have spoken. And perhaps, you know, I can understand where you're coming from, but trust me, it is not window dressing. It is a moral statement that you are making in support of the dignity of our immigrant neighbors. I see 22 young men every single day at Vider House. One of them is a young man from Venezuela. He is not a member of Tren de Agua, as President Trump would have us all believe. And when he goes out to do landscaping in some of the homes here in Arlington Heights, he never knows if he's going to come back. I encourage you to make this moral statement. It is so much more than window dressing or a warm blanket. Thank you.
Thank you. Up is Megan, and on deck is Eric Lamkins.
Good evening. My name is Megan Janowick, and I stand before you today because I've been deeply disturbed and saddened watching federal immigration and customs enforcement officers terrorize my community under the guise of public safety. I can tell you most assuredly that I have never felt less safe or worried for myself, family, and most specifically my Latina friends and neighbors than I have with ICE roaming our streets with seemingly little protections. Parents are scared to pick up their children from school. Children wonder whether their parents will return home from work or why their classmates have suddenly disappeared. It's apparent to me that ICE is acting deliberately to instill this fear and divide our communities, specifically our immigrant communities. They drive in unmarked vehicles, change their license plates, they wear masks and face coverings to hide their identities. They improperly wield weapons, draw guns, deploy tear gas, detain first and ask questions later based on skin color of the individual or the language they speak, resulting in the detention of perhaps lawful residents, U.S. citizens, or long residing residents of Arlington Heights, this Arlington Heights community that may be undocumented. ICE seems intent on violating personal liberties and constitutional rights of members of this community. As others have already mentioned, we've seen agents assaulting locals, using excessive force for no reason other than to show power and instill fear in the hearts of our immigrant neighbors, families, in clear violation of state and local law. And this must be enforced by local law enforcement. Regulate their access, regulate their conduct, and protect your constituents. Show strength and courage in this moment and stand up for our immigrant neighbors. Be leaders in this fight against fascism. I want to move now to the specific ordinance and resolution being discussed this evening. Showing solidarity with our neighboring communities is imperative in this moment, and to the concerns that certain items in any ordinance are enforceable, I say make them challenge it. Legality is not morality, and with all due respect to the board, I do not want to hear that it may be a waste of time and resources to protect our communities. I echo a former speaker in saying that I too can think of few things more important than defending the constitutional rights of your constituents. Finally, I too also wish to respond to Trustee Gilbert's concern with regard to precedent and remind this board that what we are seeing is unprecedented, and we cannot respond to the lawless actions of this administration and the violence it has inflicted on this community with diffidence. Immigrants are the backbone to our country. Arlington Heights is no exception, and I ask you all to stand up for our immigrant neighbors and be leaders today and moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Eric Lamkins is up, and Colleen Hill and Carla Wallach are tag team, apparently.
Hello, thank you. I concur with everything. This is actually in a little bit of a different direction to what Trustee Dunnington had mentioned, a website. I think it would be important, if not valuable, to the residents based on what I've heard tonight, as well as a business owner, that we have a website that might actually give direction to us as far as what we should do, what we shouldn't do, what our best practices, and how to conduct ourselves when involved with ICE. I don't personally know legally if ICE comes in my front yard, can I kick them out? And as a business owner, if they come into my business, can I kick them out? So I think if the city could offer something in provide us with help to guide us as far as how to handle these situations, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleen and Carla?
To the Board of Trustees and fellow window dressing enthusiasts, thank you for being here. I am obviously in very much agreement of everything that's been proposed here, but I do think that we need to take it a bit further than what we've already done. So I am proposing that not only do we protect our communities by what you are proposing, by enforcing exclusionary zones within Arlington Heights, but also banning face masks for federal agents, requiring federal vehicles to bear license plates, require warrants prior to arrests, informing citizens of what these warrants look like, informing the village when arrests have been made by ICE, and prohibit the use of chemicals when addressing protests. I would also like to include our shared experience, and of course with Katie over there too. Our children were on their way to school last week when we all received a text message picture of a house and federal agents detaining somebody who was within the neighborhood. My children didn't know what was happening, but we all as mothers prepared our kids for the regular school day, knowing that there potentially was going to be a conversation about why it is that that person's father would not be returning home that day. These are the messages that we are sending to our children.
Yeah, I would just like to add 2 points because I know we're at the last group here. One being that I just feel a big, huge immense sense of gratitude for everybody that stood up here and was heard with their hands shaking, with their phone notes, feeling compelled to speak. Because like many of you, I'm sure we all feel like a sense of we don't know what to do in the sense of unprecedented time, in the sense of we feel like the rule of law is just out the window. So thank you for everybody that came and spoke, because it just renews my sense of community in the village of Arlington Heights. Secondly, to echo the point of sense of trust and sense of security, given the situations that we've had around our schools, the question that my kids are asking is, are the police still on our side? Are they still protecting us, or are they not? This kind of ordinance, this kind of position that the village would take restores that sense of trust, restores that sense of protect and to serve for even your youngest community members, which we are really instilling to them this rule of law, the rule of village trustees that are positioned here to really uphold and protect us all. So I just wanted to finally say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla and Colleen. And you're right. You know what? It is true. To thank everybody here. This is not easy. It's not easy to stand up and speak in front of people, especially knowing that, it's on camera, on TV, and people are watching at home. So power to you guys. Great job. It was well done. Didn't like all the applause, but that's okay. So what we'll do now is we'll talk again on the board level here, and I think we hear loud and clear where this is going, but let's go ahead and anybody who has comments or questions. Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you. Actually, the last speaker said what I want to say, and that is thank you to all of you who are here tonight. Thank you to the people watching. Thank you to the people who have emailed us, contacted us by various means. I know some of you here have contacted us also in addition to being here and speaking tonight. It is a very important subject, and I obviously am in support of this ordinance, the proposed ordinance. So the drafting of the ordinance. Let me be perfectly clear. And I also agree, as I said earlier, that it's really important to take a stand, not just within our own community, but as not just being the village of good neighbors, but the village of all our good neighbors and our whole northwest suburban area, because this really extends so much further. It is unprecedented times that we live in. I, for one, am not worried about precedent. I never in my lifetime have I seen this sort of, have I experienced this sort of thing in a community in which I live. So I think we're going, doing the right thing. Thank you.
Mayor?
Okay, anyone else?
Mayor?
Yes, Trustee Gilbert.
So I would like to echo that. I want to thank all of you for coming and for speaking. And I just want to remind everybody out there who's in the room and who's watching that when we come to these board meetings, a lot of times this is the first time, well, it is the first time that we all get to be together to talk about these things. So we haven't fleshed out ideas or flushed them out. We're doing that here. So I know that sometimes, comments can be made that, might be misconstrued, but I welcome the open dialogue from all of my fellow trustees. And I hope that you guys continue to do that, because even when you make points that are contrary to what I might be thinking, I appreciate those. And I hope that everyone watching and in the room appreciates that as well. Again, we're trying to do our best for the village, and we do have the village's best interest in mind. But I just wanted a reminder to everybody about how this works. We don't get to talk about what we're going to talk about when we get here. So you're seeing the meeting in real time. And so I'm sure we all appreciate your patience with that aspect as well. Thank you.
Anyone else? Trustee Dunnington?
Thank you, Mayor. I also wanted to thank everyone so much for coming tonight, sitting here for several hours and speaking out. It's really important. I think that this ordinance is an easy way for the village board to show that Arlington Heights is a welcoming community built on respect, inclusion, and trust. Thanks.
Trustee Bertucci?
Thank you. Yes, I'd also like certainly to thank everybody for coming. So to Trustee Gilbert's point, there is something that's called the Open Meetings Act, and so there is no back conversations or side conversations, and so Trustee, I think Gilbert and I have a similar style, so we'll banter things around, and we'll say things like, what we're doing, is this just window dressing? And we'll look for somebody else to banter back and say, no, we need to make a statement, whatever. So there is some of that going on. So thank you for your patience with that. It doesn't mean we don't care. We see the emotion on everybody here. And we are not heartless, contrary to maybe some people's thoughts. But so just a reminder that what you are seeing is live action, so to speak. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I think what we're going to do next is do a roll call vote on this, which is a direction to staff.
I think
Hart's got something.
No, you're doing great. I was waiting.
No, it's a direction to staff to create an ordinance that,
as my understanding is, it would be to prohibit civil immigration enforcement on village-owned property, not including streets and sidewalks.
that is what I understand, and our motion maker and our second
Correct.
agrees? Okay. All right. Very good. Maggie, please.
Trustee Santa Maria?
Yes.
Trustee Dunnington?
Yes.
Trustee Gilbert?
Yes.
Trustee Manganaro?
Aye.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Zyck?
Yes.
Trustee Bertucci?
Yes.
President Tinaglia?
Yes. So, motion carries with a unanimous voice, and now you can clap. All right. It is fun to clap sometimes. Your voices were heard. Our voices are heard. We're speaking one voice together. It doesn't happen often that this board makes a unanimous vote like that. But words do matter, and we appreciate it all. So thank you all for taking the time to being here. This is going to conclude our meeting, other than the fact that I have to call on Manager Recklaus for his closed session request.
Thank you, Mayor. Staff would request a motion to enter closed session per 5 ILCS 120/2C1, appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, or performance or dismissal of a specific employee or employees of the public body or legal counsel.
Do we have such a motion?
So move.
Motion made by Trustee LaBedz, seconded by
Second.
Trustee Manganaro. Got you first. All those in favor
Aye.
say aye.
But, do we have to do a voice vote on that?
No, hold on. You do need to have a roll call vote. You do have a roll
In a
call
roll
vote.
call.
But before that, do you want to do minutes? There was minutes in there.
Oh, apologize, yeah.
So I do believe I would recommend based on information.
Yes.
The motion should be under 2C1 for employment matters and also 2C21 for matters concerning minutes of closed sessions.
Okay, will the motion, can the motion be amended by the maker and the second?
I would agree to the, do I have to do a formal amendment to the motion?
My opinion is you do not if it has a consensus of the board, so.
I agree with what you said. I'm sure you have consensus of the.
Manganaro agrees
I
as
am noting,
well.
I've seen a lot of nodding heads, so I think
Okay.
by acclamation, the motion would be under 2C1 and 2C21. And if you can then call the vote, Mayor, it has to be a roll call vote.
We'll do a roll call vote. Maggie, please.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Manganaro?
Aye.
Trustee Dunnington?
Yes.
Trustee Santa Maria?
Yes.
Trustee Gilbert?
Yes.
Trustee Zyck?
Yes.
Trustee Bertucci?
Yes.
President Tinaglia?
Yes. Okay, we will not be reporting out. Thank you, everyone.